This is an update to my Altoona Mafia video. If you didn't see that, I'll leave a link above and in the description. I just want to make a note that some of this testimony is very graphic, so be prepared for that and consider those listening around you. I recently obtained courtroom transcripts for the Verilla Crew trials between 1983 and 1985. I was also able to review the Altoona Mirror archives that detailed all of the grand jury hearings and murder trials that occurred during this time period. A lot of the pieces that I was missing in my previous research on this topic is actually included in this information. I was also contacted by retired WTAJ news anchor John McClintock, who shared some fascinating information in relation to all of this, including his involvement in the 1976 Jeffrey Doherty spree murders in Altoona. Apparently, Doherty actually transferred all of his belongings to John McClintock. I'm trying to coordinate John's availability for an interview so that we can all hear this from him. John also put me in contact with Altoona Mirror reporter Phil Ray. Ray was the main reporter for the Verilla Crew trial, so the majority of the articles that I reference here were written by him. I also reached out to Phil to try to set up an interview, so stay tuned for that. But just a quick note about Jay's Bar. Those of you that said that it was located at the previous Mountain City Tavern were 100% correct. The addresses match up. I found articles referring to the Mountain City Tavern starting in 1938 and continuing until 1977. Afterwards, that same address is referred to as Jay's Bar. But a September 1st, 1977 Altoona Mirror article indicates that someone maliciously reported that Jay's Bar was on fire. They listed the address as 1208 16th Street, which is the same address as the Mountain City Tavern. A September 15th, 1980 Altoona Mirror indicates that a rear window was forced open to Jay's Bar and $400 was taken. That article also indicated 1208 16th Street for Jay's Bar. Before we move into the trials, I want to quickly touch on the Francis Misitano murder. A November 29, 1979 Altoona Mirror article reported that in early September, Francis Misitano reported to the city police that his 1979 Harley-Davidson motorcycle was stolen from his front porch at 1515 15th Street. The motorcycle was never recovered, it says, and that was what several people said in the comments, that they thought that this had something to do with the missing motorcycle and that he may have had some links to the Seekers, possibly been a member of the Seekers. The article also reported that when Misitano's body was found, he was wearing a Jay's Bar t-shirt with Italian words written on it. The Mirror received information that Misitano was allegedly told to leave a city bar the night of his disappearance because his underage companion was caught by management drinking from his glass. So that is interesting. Apparently, John Verilla III was not joking in his comment to me about the existence of Jay's Bar t-shirts. So let's get into the trial. Articles indicate that in December of 1983, the trials began. The first hearing was for John Verilla Jr., son of John Verilla Sr., the head of the crime organization called The Family. Another hearing was set for this afternoon for Brian McCord, who was charged with arson of McCord's AG Market at 722 Fifth Avenue on February 27, 1979. Verilla Jr. was ordered to stand trial for criminal conspiracy and receiving stolen property from a burglary of AAA mobile homes in Duncansville in January of 1981. A state trooper testified that a Thomas Stewart, an employee of AAA Mobile Homes, stated that he borrowed money from Caracciolo and afterwards he stopped at Jay's Bar to meet with Caracciolo, where he agreed to repay him by the removal of refrigerators and stoves from AAA Mobile Homes. Stewart was working when AAA was burglarized and a stove and refrigerator was taken to Caracciolo's house at 1704 3rd Avenue. Another stove and refrigerator was taken to Verilla Jr.'s basement. Ernest Martz, the owner of Market at 2420 Broad Avenue, was ordered to stand trial for lying to the grand jury. Caracciolo testified that he was sent by Verilla to blow up Martz's car and shoot at his house at 2426 Broad Avenue after they discovered that Martz was not turning in all of his gambling money. Caracciolo stated that Scott Bruner and Ezzie Wright carried out the acts. Martz told the grand jury that he did not talk to Verilla or Ruggiero about the numbers, but Martino was wearing a wire and recorded it. Martino was actually the first person to turn on the family and become an informant. Caracciolo testified that Preston Ryan brought Dennis Hileman to his house to discuss Hileman wanting to bring cocaine and heroin from Washington and Baltimore area, but needed someone to finance it. Caracciolo stated that he was angry with Ryan for bringing Hileman to his house. Verilla then checked with Captain Green of the Altoona Police Department, who advised that Hileman was working with Detective Gibney because they had several warrants for his arrest. Hileman had a lot of money, so he was allowed to hang around, but he kept demanding that Verilla let him run numbers and other errands. Caracciolo testified that about 6 months after he met Hileman at his apartment, Hileman came into Jay's bar to meet with Verilla, and he knew Verilla was mad when he slammed his glasses down on the table. Verilla said he was sick of Hileman. Verilla told him that he wanted Hileman dead. Dump him, Verilla said. Caracciolo said that he also suspected Hileman of burglarizing his apartment, so he agreed with the decision to murder Hileman. During questioning, Caracciolo vividly described the murder of Hileman. Ryan and Brunner kidnapped Hileman, bound him, put him in the rear of a borrowed truck, and called Caracciolo, who was at Tony Hugar's house. Caracciolo then joined the group and questioned Hileman. Ryan was driving as Caracciolo began to beat Hileman with a hammer. Hileman admitted to being an informant for Gibney, but denied burglarizing Caracciolo's apartment. Brunner also hit Hileman with a hammer. Caracciolo then used a knife on Hileman. As Caracciolo described how he put a knife through Hileman's eye, Angelina, Verilla's wife, began to cry and then collapsed. Caracciolo said that Hileman's death had a purpose in Verilla's mind. That will let everybody in town know not to fool with us. They won't send another rat down here. This should make us look strong in town, Verilla told him. The jury listened to 5 hours of testimony explaining how Mart's car and the 12th Street News burned. The owner of the Greenwood Steakhouse contracted Verilla for that fire. Michael Cavalet's home was burned because he owed Verilla money. Caramadri's garage was burned just because he wanted it burned for insurance purposes. In July of '83, witnesses testified that John Clark threatened Dr. Maris, who was supplying drugs to the Verilla Crew. Maris told Caracciolo, who then confronted Clark and humiliated him at Jay's bar. Howard Hugar told Caracciolo that Clark was upset about the incident at Jay's bar and that he was going to go to police. They then decided that Clark had to be killed. On January 23, 1979, Caracciolo met Clark and told him they were taking the crew to Johnstown to commit a crime. Clark drove his own car while Preston Ryan, Joseph Martino, and Marvin Wansley were in Ryan's car. They drove to a deserted road near Mineral Point. Caracciolo held a gun on Clark while Ryan and Martino tied his hands and feet. Caracciolo placed a paper bag over Clark's head and then plunged a hatchet into it. Gasoline was poured over Clark and ignited. Caracciolo stated that Verilla would be proud. Another article dated July 19, 1983 indicates that Verilla, Caramadri, and Hugar were arrested in a roundup today. In April of 1984, Blair County Prosecutor Perry interrupted testimony in the Robert Kavinsky perjury trial to point out that Kavinsky was laughing at gruesome testimony describing how Joseph McDermott's finger was severed. Caracciolo was explaining how he used a machete to sever the finger of the Conrail worker as punishment for writing numbers at Kavinsky's Roundhouse Inn in Logan Township. Caracciolo stated that he cut off one of McDermott's fingers and placed it into the Woolrich coat that he was wearing. Later that night, he took the finger to Verilla, and Verilla hugged Caracciolo, stating that he was proud of him. Verilla said he wanted to show the finger to his associates in the Pittsburgh family. Verilla later gave the finger back to Caracciolo, and he then threw it away. Caracciolo stated that he was proud of himself. He also described Kavinsky as a writer who complained about McDermott. Caracciolo said that Verilla stated, "He wants to stick his finger in the pot? This is my town. Bring me a couple fingers." McDermott was then kidnapped and his finger severed on March 22, 1978. This is the point that Kavinsky started laughing. McDermott actually testified at the trial and showed the jury his mutilated hand. He was asked if he remembered the night of March 22, 1978. McDermott replied, "Oh yes, it still comes back to me." Joseph Martino was in witness protection when he testified that Joseph Ruggiero was the head of Verilla's numbers operation when he went to Verilla in March of 1978 to complain that McDermott's numbers operation was hurting us bad. Martino stated that this meeting took place at Jay's Bar on 16th Street. Kavinsky testified that McDermott was offering a larger payoff than Verilla, so rail workers were playing numbers with McDermott instead of Verilla. Caracciolo testified that Ruggiero wanted McDermott's arms broken, Kavinsky wanted his back broken, and Verilla ordered the finger. Martino was supposed to go with Caracciolo to the roundhouse, but he broke his leg, so instead Scott Brunner and John Clark went with him and Preston Ryan. Caracciolo testified that they bound McDermott and placed him in a van where Caracciolo questioned him before removing his finger with a machete. Caracciolo stated that he now feels that it was a cowardly thing to do. Caracciolo also described him and his associates as bums like us. That's what we were. That's what we did. Caracciolo was asked why they did these things, particularly when on many occasions they did not get money for it. Caracciolo replied, "It was all a defense mechanism that the family stays strong. Nobody moves in. That's why we do this." David Cervello, the son of Joe the Weep Ruggiero, told the grand jury that Kavinsky lied to them during his testimony. In September of '84, Martino testified in the John Verilla murder trial in reference to John Clark. He testified that Caracciolo thought Verilla was a god. Martino stated that he was arrested for armed robbery in March of 1980 and agreed to cooperate with police. He worked undercover for the next 2 years. Martino, who was relocated and given a new name at this point, testified that on January 23, 1979, Clark met Caracciolo, Martino, Marvin Wansley, and Preston Ryan at Caracciolo's house. They then drove to the Merlot Trucking Company Road near Mineral Point and stopped the cars, where Caracciolo jumped out of Ryan's car and ran back to Clark. He pointed a gun at Clark's head and told Martino to pull his gun. Martino stated that he was in the back seat behind Clark, where he then pulled his gun and pointed it at Clark. Caracciolo then told Clark why they were there, that he threatened to go to police a day prior and he caused a disturbance at Dr. Mara's office. Caracciolo asked Martino if he wanted to shoot Clark, but he declined. Martino was told to go to Ryan's car, where he saw Ryan tie up Clark and lay him on the front seat. Martino stated that he heard Clark ask Caracciolo, "You aren't going to hurt me, are you?" Caracciolo answered no, and then took a hatchet and hit Clark on the head 3 times. Preston and Caracciolo poured gas all over the car and lit it. Caracciolo then opened a can of beer and used it to wash the blood off of his hands. They then all returned to Caracciolo's house, where he made them all take their boots off so that he could burn them. Caracciolo then handed them all Quaaludes and instructed them to establish an alibi. The next day, Caracciolo took Martino, Ryan, and Wansley to Dave's saddle shop and bought them new boots. They then went to Jay's bar, where Verilla congratulated them. Martino testified that Caracciolo and Verilla had told him that Verilla was a soldier in the LaRocca family, and that Verilla's boss was Gabriel Kelly Manarino. Verilla also told Martino that Thomas Ian Cuddy was to become Manarino's replacement. Martino described a meeting at the Old Philadelphia Lounge in downtown Altoona in 1972, where Verilla said he was ready to start taking back everything he'd given away. He said he had permission from Pittsburgh to take everything back. Martino stated that he first met Caracciolo in the Blair County prison and started working for him. Martino stated that he thought that the Clark killing was really stupid, and Caracciolo bragged that it was a good Mafia hit. He said that Caracciolo wanted to be just like Al Capone, kill everybody. In September of 1984, Preston Ryan testified that Caracciolo told him that John Clark has to go. The boss says he has to go. We've got to kill him. You guys have done a lot of things for me, beat people up. Now you get to prove to me you can go all the way. Ryan said he used to drink beer at Jay's bar, and once outside there, he met Caracciolo. Soon Ryan was helping Caracciolo in his construction business and was doing other construction work for Verilla. At one point in 1977, Caracciolo told him about the family. Ryan then joined the organization, and Verilla explained to Ryan that he was to be the muscle for Caracciolo. Ryan described a meeting at Chilcote's restaurant in East Freedom. Verilla, Caramadre, and Caracciolo took the other associates to dinner, and he saw Caracciolo give Verilla drug money, which Ryan had just given to Caracciolo. Ryan stated that Verilla told him that he was getting older and someday he was going to give Caracciolo the town. Kenny Rustler of 16th Street, Altoona, testified that he was in the backseat of Verilla's car in the Station Mall parking lot on January 22, 1979, when Verilla made the decision to kill Clark. Rustler indicated that he was not part of Verilla's crew, but he knew Verilla since they both worked at the railroad together in the 1950s. He stated that they both had circulatory problems, so they both walked downtown Altoona every day. Rustler said he counted money for Verilla at Jay's bar, deposited the money, brought coffee to Verilla, helped with his coat and carried his groceries. In return, Verilla bought Rustler food and clothing. Rustler actually said that Caracciolo was jealous of his relationship with Verilla. But on January 22, 1979, Rustler said he followed Verilla and Caracciolo from the Station Mall to Verilla's car. He said they had just met with Clark, and the three of them appeared to be having an argument. Verilla told Rustler to go to the Dairy Queen in the Station Mall and get something to eat and drink. After the meeting with Clark, Rustler was tagging along and could tell that Caracciolo and Verilla were very angry. Rustler got into the backseat of Verilla's car and heard Caracciolo say to Verilla, "The fingers. That was a mistake. I told you, Jack. I told you, Jack." There was a pause. Verilla took off his glasses, leaned forward, and said, "Vince, we're going to have to kill him." Caracciolo replied, "Jesus Christ." The two discussed the people over the way, a phrase that came up several times during this trial to refer to the Pittsburgh family. Verilla stated, "If they find out about him, I'm in trouble." Rustler stated that Caracciolo turned up the radio so he couldn't hear the rest of the conversation. Caracciolo said that Verilla called the meeting with Clark at the Station Mall to straighten him out. Caracciolo stated that he told Verilla, "See, you're the smart guy. You want fingers cut off. Now we have him threatening us." Verilla then told him that Clark needed to be killed. In March 1985, Howard Tony Hugar sprung several surprises on the defense at John Caramadri's murder trial. Hugar testified that Caramadri told him that he was Verilla's second in command, and if Verilla was out of town, Hugar needed to consult with him. Caramadri gave Hugar his home telephone number and instructed him to call, let it ring twice, hang up, and then call again. Hugar stated that he began cooperating with police on May 24, 1984, when his son was hit by a car and he received a phone call stating, "Next time we won't miss." Hugar also testified that he introduced Dr. Maris to Caramadri during a political rally for State Representative John Milleron. Scott Bruner testified that he would go to Jay's bar where Caracciolo would tell him to sit in a booth while he talked to Caramadri and Verilla. Caramadri testified that he spent years trying to build a dress shop in Tyrone. He said he owned 4 apartment buildings containing 26 units when he was arrested in July of 1983 for the murder of Clark. He said he met John Verilla when they worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad back in the 1940s, but they eventually both quit and went into business together. He said that Verilla called him one day stating that he had money from a claim from an injury on the railroad. Verilla purchased Frank's Spaghetti House in Altoona. Caramadri managed it. Verilla then had a heart attack, and Caramadri became the manager of Duncan Villa in Duncansville. Between 1965 and the 1970s, he said he saw Verilla very little, but in 1986, Verilla again approached him and said he wanted to supplement his income by purchasing another business. Verilla brought Caracciolo to his house. He said he previously met Caracciolo at a coffee shop and thought he was a nice guy. Caracciolo said he was in a construction business, buying old homes, repairing them, and then selling them. A month later, Caramadri and Verilla entered into another business called Jay's Bar. He said Caracciolo wanted to be partners in the bar, but Caracciolo eventually backed out, noting that Verilla and Caramadri have been longtime friends and should be in business together. Witness Joseph Corr stated that he was an inmate at the Clearfield County Prison in the spring of 1983 and saw Caracciolo and Preston Ryan get into an argument because of Ryan's cooperation with police. Corr heard the two plotting to make up a story against Verilla and Caramadri. Caracciolo allegedly told Ryan that the only way we're going to get out of this is if we get together. We're going to involve 2 people from down below. It's definitely interesting to hear details from all the first-hand witnesses during this crazy period of Altoona, PA. So like I said earlier, I plan to keep this series going with interviews of individuals that were actually involved in all of this, including investigators and news reporters. But there are so many different avenues to dig into considering this topic. You know, all the historical buildings involved with that. At the UVA Club, there's some crazy stories surrounding that place, obviously. And just some of the restaurants. Unfortunately, a lot of the restaurants aren't there. I originally planned on doing the Mafia restaurants of Altoona, but most of them have been torn down. I'm also currently researching the Gangs of Altoona video, but that's probably going to have to be a series because just the Seekers versus Outlaws part of that alone is going to have to be its own episode. So stay tuned for that. And if you have any ideas or additional information, please keep sending it my way.